I am here with Kit Klarenberg for, I think, the second time on Bad Faith Podcast. Welcome back.
Always a pleasure, never a burden, Brianna. Thanks for having me.
Love it. Kit, you are an investigative reporter, a journalist with Mint Press News. You also report all over the place. You have your own Substack, which is called...
Well, the title is Global Delinquents, but the imaginative URL is www.kitklarenberg.com.
Okay, perfect.
Maybe see you there.
That's easy enough to remember. And Kit, you focus on the intelligence industry, I guess we should call it. But I want to broaden this up a little bit because you've done a lot of really important reporting recently on what I perceive to be a new twist and turn in the biggest news story in the world, which is, of course, the ongoing genocide in Gaza. There's a connection that you called a long time before other people, this new plot to ostensibly relocate 1.5 million Palestinians to Somaliland. Let's set this up by watching a recent clip of Donald Trump talking about more than half of Gaza's population being relocated.
Recent poll showed that as many as half of Gazans would be willing to leave the Gaza Strip if afforded the opportunity to do so. Back in February, you said that all Gazans should be resettled.
I heard that number today, half of Gaza would leave. I've always said it. I said if they were given the opportunity to live in a better climate, they would move. They're there because they sort of have to be. I think it would be a great opportunity, but let's see if that opportunity presents itself. But we're helping the people of Gaza a lot. So is Israel, by the way. So we'll see what happens. But I saw that it was a poll. It was actually more than half the people would leave if they were given the opportunity. And I've been saying that for a long time. To me, it was common sense. So it's interesting.
So, Kit, years ago, toward the beginning of the conflict, of the genocide, I remember there being a released Israeli intelligence report that hinted at the prospect of resettling Palestinians in Africa. Of course, this scheme goes back to before the founding of Israel itself, where there were locations in Africa that were being scrutinized for a Jewish state in the first place. But I got to say, even to my very cynical ear 2 years ago, this sounded outlandish. After hearing the comments recently, and of course, what's been going on the ground in Somalia, the recognition of Somaliland, this is all seeming a lot more plausible. Kit, what on earth is going on?
Yeah, there's quite a lot to unpack here, and I think that, the first thing that we should bear in mind, in regard to your comments about how, shunting Gazas, I actually broke a story back in, I think it was October 2023. There was this Zionist think tank that published explicit blueprints for shunting the entire Palestinian population out of Gaza and into Egypt, and it went into intense detail about how this could be done. So I think that's been the plan since day one of the 21st Holocaust that the Zionist entity is still carrying out in Gaza, despite the supposed ceasefire. This is a long-running objective. You've got to bear in mind that, we despite the fact that Israel is now an international pariah and the IDF suffered terrible defeats and casualties every time they dared to actually step in on foot to Gaza, which is why they primarily relied on carpet bombing the occupied territory from the air, like the cowards that they are. Despite that, Israel is expanding now. Benjamin Netanyahu is, currently the subject of an ongoing prosecution for corruption. And his defense isn't that he's innocent because he's guilty as hell. His defense is, you should let me off because I'm the leader that created Greater Israel, or the foundations thereof. Okay, and if you think about actually, since the start of the Gaza genocide, we've had the loss of Syria, the collapse of Assad's government and its replacement by this Al-Nusra clique installed by MI6, I might add, Israel has also taken credit for the fall of Assad. This government has now, signed over the long disputed Golan Heights to Israel, and did so, within the past few days. There is, talk of, expanding to Lebanon. Still, that's ongoing. They've gotten away with all of this. Despite all of the hate, the justifiable hatred and anger this has elicited, amongst global opinion. They've got away with pretty much everything, so they're off leash now, and I don't think that any potential outcome of this is particularly unthinkable at this stage, because they can do what they want. I mean, there are alleged, the ICCC sought warrants for Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant based on, just voluminous evidence of genocidal intent and genocidal action in Gaza. They have traveled freely ever since, through the airspace of countries which, which are signatories to the International Criminal Court, and by law should be halting their planes in the air and arresting them and rendering them to The Hague to stand trial. They've been traveling without hindrance. The ICC itself has been sanctioned to the point that its staff can't even use Microsoft products personally. The prospect of Gaza's population, which is living in a territory where I think it's like, according to UN figures, it's like 85% of the buildings have been destroyed. It's hell on earth, where people are dying of starvation and hypothermia, and if they're lucky enough not to get just picked off by the IDF. For no good reason. The prospect of a vast, the remaining population of Gaza not being shunted into neighboring Egypt, which was, the kind of initial plan, I think, or Jordan, which already has a sizable Palestinian refugee population. It might be the majority. The government refuses to hold censuses on this question, interestingly. But Somaliland could be a destination for Palestinian refugees. This would also feed into the wider geopolitical objectives of the US and Israel, because if the US and Israel having just recognized Somaliland, and we'll get into the wider background behind that in due course, I'm sure, this could be a prelude to the US and Israel setting up shop militarily in the country, which is just 700 kilometers away from Yemen, which has, Ansarallah, God's partisans, have proven to be the most redoubtable genocide, anti-Zionist force in the region, and completely shut down the Red Sea for the best part of 2 years. And the prospect that Somaliland would be full of Palestinian refugees, it might mean that they could be used as hostages or effective human shields to prevent Ansarallah counterattacks. So this plan fills in a lot of blanks, solves a lot of problems, there are, other reasons why Somaliland is, a potentially fruitful destination for Palestinian refugees. Namely, that it is governed by an absolutely brutal, British-trained, equipped, armed, and directed puppet government, which has a proven track record of, and a fierce reputation for brutal violence if local citizens step out of line, in any serious way. This could represent, another open air concentration camp, much like Gaza did from 2008 until now.
So, Kit, there's a lot there. One, I don't want to sort of hop, skip, and jump past this fundamental impunity with which Israel is able to behave. I mean, when you were talking about how far-reaching Israel's bombing campaigns and destabilization have been in the region, I'm reflecting on the weird parallels between what was projected onto Putin's alleged agenda when he invaded Ukraine and how the West's investment in intervening in that conflict was hinged on the idea that if the West didn't step in, Putin was going to have an agenda to take over all of Europe. And the indifference to Israel and Netanyahu doing exactly that and very openly talking about greater Israel in the context of the Middle East, going so far as to very openly talking about plans to ethnically cleanse / relocate Palestinians, as you pointed out. Since the very beginning of this conflict, there was this plan circulating to move Palestinians into the Sinai Peninsula. And now this once seemingly fantastical plan coming into clear focus to ethnically cleanse Palestinians into Somaliland. Now, the why Somalia of it all, we've already touched on some of these points. The fact that geographically speaking, Somalia and the Horn of Africa is one side of the narrow strait opposite Yemen, where these Houthi fighters have been such a sort of last bastion and most rigorous last standing form of resistance against Israel's genocide. But how do we get to a place where Somaliland is being recognized in the first place, and what has been going on internally in Somalia that sort of laid the foundation for this move?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this is an extensive history, and I shall try to condense it as much as possible. And no offence is intended to any Somalian by me doing so. Effectively, Somalia for centuries has had a reputation as kind of like wanting to stand alone and rejecting not only imperial kind of foreign imperial control, but also like kind of traditional governance structures.
Before proceeding further, I want to make additional remarks in my capacity as a Somali representative of Somalia to directly address the claims made by the representative of Israel who spoke before me. I will make 3 points, Excellency. First, actions of occupying power in Palestine and indeed in the broader region are well documented. These actions constitute clear violations of international law. What we see today and time again are acts to terrorize civilian populations and crimes against humanity and forced displacement of a whole community, starvation of innocent people, and killing and maiming hundreds of thousands. And someone doing all these things are lecturing us today what they call genocide and things like that. I'm shocked to listen to the outrageous comments from the Israeli representative.
Now, in the late 1800s, Somalia was carved up between the British, the Italians, and the French into different zones, and it remained that way until the end of the Second World War, where it unified into one country, Somalia. I might add that actually in the lead up to this, while World War II was ongoing, there was a Zionist movement called the Harar Council that was based in New York, and it called for the settlement of European Jews in Somaliland. You can find online correspondence between the Harar Council and the British government, the American government, and the king of Ethiopia at the time, and making the argument that this would very handily solve the quote-unquote Jewish question in Europe, because so far attempts to colonize Palestine have been met with very stiff resistance by Palestinians who are not particularly happy about white European settlers stealing their land, amongst other issues.
And the belief was that the Somalians were presumed to be more happy with that prospect.
Yeah. Well, it was considered that, well, the consideration was, well, the territory is much bigger and the population is a lot more passive. So, like, we won't run into the same issues that we run into in Palestine, which is, it's a scrap of land the size of Wales. Like, it's not very big compared to the vast plains of sub-Saharan Africa. But this didn't get very far, as an idea. And towards the end of World War II, the notion of then mandatory Palestine becoming a homeland for the Jewish people, gained in currency, even though the majority of Jewish opinion was at the time opposed to it. But anyway, the point is, after Somalia became independent of British, French, and Italian rule, it very quickly embraced radical revolutionary politics and became a communist state. Throughout the 60s and 1970s, and also the start of the 1980s, it supported anti-colonial movements throughout the region, and it was involved in Mozambique's struggle for independence from the Portuguese. It was involved in the destruction of Rhodesia, which was this disgusting white settler colonial project in near South Africa. It also had, funnily enough, a very close relationship with the then communist government of South Yemen, which went communist after they kicked out the British in the early 1960s. Now, this all came sadly to an end during the 1980s, when Somalia had a very bitter and brutal civil war. Which the British and Americans supported, of course, and it resulted in the country descending into just total chaos with different warlords and criminal factions battling it out for supremacy. Now, in 1991, Somaliland formally declared independence from Somalia, and since then has claimed to be an independent sovereign territory. And there have been intermittent battles with Somali forces, as much as they exist, over contested territory in the region. Somalia itself has struggled to really establish much of a state structure, although I think the local population to a large extent seem pretty okay with that. As I wrote in April, the Somaliland is, to all intents and purposes, a modern British colony in all but name. It's the level of penetration by British intelligence into every sector of its state apparatus is really quite extraordinary, and this is all hidden. Like, this is not publicized in any meaningful way by the British government, but they train government officials in how to deal with the media and propagate strategic communications. They train its military, its judiciary, its police, its prison guards, its security and intelligence apparatus, its Coast Guard. Like, they're all trained and funded and managed ultimately by British intelligence. And yes, as I say, it has claimed to be independent since 1991. For a long time, there has been a lobbying effort to get Western countries to recognize Somaliland as an independent country. They've not been successful. George Galloway, MP, recently exiled from Britain due to getting stopped under counter-terror legislation upon returning to the country. He's talked about how he was being lobbied in the 90s to get on board with recognizing Somaliland as an independent state. So
help me understand the politics of that. I mean, internally, what is the stated, even if kind of pretextual, rationale for Somaliland being independent, and how do people internally feel about that? How do they see the politics around Somaliland's independence?
Well, I mean, it's kind of similar to like Hong Kong, where you have a because it was until the late 90s, a formal British colony. At least the kind of ruling elite within Somaliland see themselves as descended from British rule, and they see themselves as different and, by definition, superior to average Somalis. So there's that aspect to it, but it's also, I think that in the spirit of this is something that the Anglo-Americans have been doing for a very, very long time. Like, they stoke nationalism and promote false differences between people who are the same. I mean, the last time that we spoke, we talked about British and American support for Ukrainian nationalism. As this notion that Ukrainians are completely separate culturally, linguistically, and historically from Russians, when this is just not true. And a similar dynamic is afoot, within Somaliland. Interestingly, Somaliland has quite close relations with Taiwan, where an identical dynamic is afoot.
So when I log on to Twitter and I see that clip, which I'm sure you saw, of Somalians running around with Israeli flags, celebrating an independent, recognized Somaliland, that is an expression of a sense of sort of ethnic difference and sort of self-determination, but then also Israel.
إذا جاءك المنافقون قالوا نشهد إنك لرسول الله والله يعلم إنك لرسوله والله يشهد إن المنافقين لكاذبون اتخذوا أيمانهم جنة فصدوا عن سبيل الله إنهم ساء ما كانوا يعملون ذلك بأنهم آمنوا ثم كفروا فطبع.
Yeah, well, it's just like, I mean, I sadly forget who said this, but they said, imagine going from, becoming, the most unpopular country in East Africa to the most unpopular country in the world by token of Israel's endorsement of your independence. But I mean, I do think that this has opened the floodgates, actually, and very depressingly, because as I say, this is like a very ongoing, long-running effort by the putative government of Somaliland to be recognised as independent, and the current leadership has made international recognition a priority. Now, if you look at the contents of Project 2025, which is this, it was drawn up by the far-right Heritage Foundation think tank and has been kind of like widely perceived as a blueprint for Donald Trump's second term in office. It has a lengthy section on Somaliland in it, very bizarrely, and it specifically it specifically recommends the recognition of Somali statehood to counter growing Chinese influence in the Horn of Africa. So again, there's a lot of different interests at play here, which are not particularly obvious. But there are several British MPs, including this idiot called Gavin Williamson, who distinguished himself as he was one of those people who managed to keep on getting ministerial roles within the British government despite total incompetence and stupidity, and he's made it like a personal crusade to get Somaliland recognised, and has boasted about how he's coordinated with the White House on this. He's gotten Somaliland citizenship as a result of his personal campaign, and there are posters of him flying in the country, I gather. But yeah, I think that from the perspective of the US and the British, and the Israelis, this would serve a lot of different interests, and Israel won't be alone for very long in recognizing the state. Somaliland as a state, and that's quite problematic because the African Union has condemned this in the strongest possible terms. International legal scholars have done the same. But we're living in a world where Israel can get away with pretty much anything, and have a bevy of kind of rogues gallery of Western leaders who are ready to justify whatever it's doing.
I want to put a really fine point on that, because part of this story, how it's manifesting domestically, is a simultaneous hate campaign against Somali Americans, with Ilhan Omar being sort of the tip of the spear for this attack, but also this news story, which is, as far as I understand it, not much of a news story, of there being fraud at a Minnesota daycare that's getting blown up into some sort of argument about the ethnic corruption of the Somali people and their lack of fitness to be American citizens in the first place, which of course is just an echo of every sort of colonial racial superiority campaign that we've ever seen, dating back to the first ship that launched from Portugal or whatever. So the idea that there seems to be some connection between a long-term effort to resettle Palestinians in Africa to make way for Jewish colonists, to a hate campaign against Somali Americans to try to align the American public against the idea of domestic Somalians and for the idea of a breakaway state from Somalia to enable our Middle East policies. Not to mention going back to the original plans to put Israel in Africa to the first place. I mean, it feels sort of overwhelming the extent to which Israeli policy, or policies at least fundamentally related to Israel at their core, have such a far reach in the domestic sphere, and in a way that is largely, frankly, invisible unless you're watching independent media. Because certainly if I turn on MSNBC, I'm not going to hear Abby Phillips say, oh yes, the reason why they're vilifying Ilhan Omar has something to do with the Zionist project.
Yeah, well, I mean, it must be stressed as well that Trump has throughout this year, without this has garnered zero media coverage whatsoever. He's been conducting relentless air and drone strikes against Somalia throughout the whole year, and then this is combined with this relentless effort to demonize Somalis, in the
who
US.
is he striking? Who is the ostensible target of these strikes, and what's the ostensible justification for them?
Well, I mean, he as such as Trump's style. He's gone from claiming that this is targeting irregular migration to Al-Shabaab.
What is irregular migration? America's going to bomb Somalia because it thinks people are migrating within Somalia irregularly? What does that mean?
Well, of course, I mean, Somalia has this massive border with the US, and that's how they're all getting in. But I mean, I must say that I much love for the Somali people who for a few weeks back. There was this whole meme about how Minnesota had been granted to the Somalis in the Bible, and they produced like these amazing memes where they were saying like, we have like one state and we're surrounded by 49 states that hate us. So give us billions of dollars in nukes and like, but I mean, as hilarious as that was, I mean, it is, the demonization is horrendous. It's like become very mainstream with, noticeably zero pushback from the Democrats, at all. I mean, does anyone even remember them at this point? And poor Ilhan Omar, who is by no means a radical has been subject to absolutely horrific abuse and accusations.
Yes, they pulled over her child in a car. Police did, harassing them. There are these allegations that she has enriched herself unduly through her position in Congress because her net worth went up like $30 million, but it's because she married a man worth $30 million. Ilhan, put me onto your game, girl. JK. But there was the Somali couple who was at like a Cinnabon or some mall, concession store, and they were called the N-word and cussed out by the white American woman working behind the counter.
That's nigger. I am racist.
So idiot, for
and
real.
You are a nigger.
You are an idiot. No, I'm not.
I am racist, and I'll say that to the whole entire world. Don't be disrespectful.
You ruined your life, by the way.
Oh, you're talking about respect? You're talking about respect? You are fired from this place, motherfucker. You're not gonna be working here.
Suck it.
Suck what? Look how you
Suck
fucking look
it.
like.
What's wrong with you?
What the fuck is wrong with you, you fucking ugly bitch? Get the fuck out of
Ugly?
my face.
Talking about ugliness?
Did I stutter?
I mean, if some event like that had happened directed toward a Jewish American, it would have been headlines for weeks. But there is this very ominous way that all of these instances are being absorbed, normalized, mainstream. Randy Fine, a congressman, can get on Twitter and say the most openly, unequivocally racist things every single day, Islamophobic things every single day, nary a chance of censorship. But Ilhan Omar sneezes, and rightly calls out Israeli capture of our government, AIPAC capture of our government, and is censured by everybody, including a huge number, I think the majority of Democrats in Congress, for her All About the Benjamins comment. So, I mean, it is the normalization of it, and to your point, the lack of any kind of pushback from a so-called resistance party. It's rather terrifying to think where this could all, what the terminus of all of this could be, when there's no one acting as a backstop.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, and I think I must say as well that, based on my own experience, the London that I grew up in, which is, very different to the London of today, it had a sizable Somali population. Which was, they were, legitimate refugees who didn't want to leave Somalia, but had to because of the brutal, kind of almost genocidal civil war that erupted there. There was a massive effort to demonize them in advance of illegally deporting them. I was thinking it was about 10 years ago. There was this huge media effort to demonize them as, dangerous, violent criminals. And it was a prelude to a mass deportation ruled illegal by the European Court of Human Rights, but Britain just went ahead and did it anyway. And I mean, of course, the US has a long and deplorable history of just doing whatever it wants, irrespective of the very international law it claims to uphold and hold others to. So yeah, I do think this is going in a very dark direction, and as we mentioned, the Somalis run their meme game, RE Minnesota, but mainstream publications like NPR are talking about how Minnesota has become this hub for Somali immigrants in the US, as if this is inherently sinister. This does have real world results, and we see this with the relentless demonization of the Chinese, which has created this massive uptick in discrimination and even violence towards Asian Americans. And then again, we saw this during the War on Terror, where the relentless demonization of Arabs and Muslims led to this climate of hatred. Which frequently manifested as physical attacks, if not outright murder, attempted or otherwise, of completely innocent Muslim Americans, patriotic as well. So I mean, yeah, it is very frightening, and I think now that Israel has signed off on Somaliland's independence, such as the Israeli lobby's influence, in DC, I'm sure that we'll be seeing a ton of lawmakers suddenly, a ton of Congress people and senators suddenly become rabid converts to the cause of Somaliland independence. I mean, I forget who it was now, irritatingly, but like earlier this year, there was like a US lawmaker who admitted that upon election, he went to this like kind of meet and greet with Zionist lobby donors, where he had like a QR code. And he would like go and talk to representatives like AIPAC or these other Israeli lobby entities, and if they liked them, if the people he was speaking to liked him, they would like scan his QR code and donate to him.
I remember my first AIPAC reception, and like your fundraiser tells you have to go, and your chief of staff tells you have to go, your committee chairman all tell you have to go, and you get there and you wear this name badge, and I remember there's a QR code on it, and what we were supposed to do was go talk to donors, and then if they liked you, they scanned your QR code to make a donation, like on the spot. And so can you just imagine how demoralizing that is to like be told that your job for the next several hours to go chat people up, hoping they would scan you like a can of tomato soup on the way out of the meeting.
I mean, it's literally purchasing.
Right. And so I saw that and I was like, wow, that is so freaking weird. And then, I was in Israel. I went multiple times, and I did not like the fact that I found someone in my room rooting around in my stuff that should not have been there at the King David Hotel when I came back to my room when no one was expecting me to be back in my room. And I just
presumably Israeli law enforcement.
Well, I don't know who it was. I just thought, like, this is weird. All of these things combined are odd, and then the policy outgrowth seems to be an obsession about the Middle East that has not served my generation well.
And it's been reported that like Congress people have their own AIPAC handlers and stuff, and it's just completely insane that this is allowed.
He's literally a product for purchase with his own barcode on him.
Yeah. No, it's completely bonkers, and there's no one really talking about this because everyone's in on the most people have, to use a British phrase, have their hands in the till. Most people are on the take. Like AOC has taken vast amounts of money from the Israeli lobby.
Really? Say more about that, because she's often touted, including by what's it called, AIPAC Tracker Twitter account, which seems to be doing good work, as someone who is all in the green, having taken $0 AIPAC dollars. So what evidence is there that she's got her hand in the till, as it were?
Well, I mean, ultimately, she knows where her bread is buttered, and she got into a lot of trouble with the DSA for her anti-Zionist stance. She's been very quiet on the Israeli genocide. You want to bear in mind that the Israeli lobby is so cellularized that there are all of the that you have like major organizations like AIPAC, which fund like all of these ostensibly independent NGOs and civil society organizations, which in turn are choosing who does and doesn't get money. And then in turn, AIPAC publishes reports boasting about how candidates it funds typically win their seats, and candidates they want, representatives they want to get rid of, typically lose. So the fact that Miss Cortez, who totally never worked for the CIA, is still in position, does raise some suspicion.
What is the let me say this. I think have been very open about my cynicism around AOC and my frustration with her as someone who was a big fan of hers when she first entered into Congress and was very hopeful about what she might achieve. But I also want to be careful not to undermine my own credibility as a critic of her by saying more than I can prove. So I want to just say that. So it's, when I ask you these follow-up questions, it's not because I'm defensive of AOC, but it's because I am defensive of my credibility as one of the few people on the left vaguely mainstream, vaguely respectable left, although I lose that credibility a little bit more every day, who has taken a critical posture to her. So like certainly what you're saying, the broader argument that AIPAC doesn't have to give you money to influence you is obviously true. They can influence you by funding your opponent. That in fact, I would argue that sometimes it looks like the amount of money given to an actual candidate is relatively small, and you might think, well, that couldn't possibly influence them. But the real money is the millions that have been given to challenge someone who is gone astray. And I also think there's plenty of legitimate criticism over AOC's past votes for the Iron Dome and all of that. And you can try to speculate as to why it is that she would take those positions, even in the absence of AIPAC money. But I am curious. I mean, I've seen her characterized as AOCIA, and have seen a little bit here and there about, her having worked for a congressman and had a different kind of a career path than the maybe oversimplified, she was a bartender and then she ran for Congress narrative that predominates. So what is your view of it, and what evidence, I should say, do we have that she's sort of on the take?
I do think that her voting record is important to look at, and I think that on top of the Iron Dome stuff, in late 2024, she voted in favor of a resolution which endorses this completely bogus definition of anti-Semitism as being inherently linked to criticism of Israel. Yeah. Which she didn't have to do.
What did she say was the rationale again? What is that definition called? It's like an acronym. The American.
Yeah, the IHRA. Yeah, which its own the one of the people who drafted it said that it falsely conflates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism and is not fit for purpose. And that's not the only example. And I think that it's just I think even if we take as you mentioned, even if we take this view that she completely rejects any and all no matter how arm's length Israeli lobby money. When it comes down to it, she knows that if she actually does challenge the prevailing pro-Zionist orthodoxy in DC, she's going to be in very serious trouble.
Just to put a finer point on that, I pulled it up. I remember now. This was about a year ago. This vote happened. So let's contrast. Cori Bush did not vote for it and tweeted out, "I condemn anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred and bigotry, period. Resolution 1499 relies on the flawed IHRA definition, conflating valid criticism of the Israeli government with anti-Semitism. Standing against hate must never come at the cost of silencing violent and necessary critiques." Okay, this is a summary from Electronic Intifada, by the way. Yeah. And then that goes on to, describe that AOC did vote for it. In that Mike Casca, her chief of staff, who was also head of comms on the Bernie campaign, a title I did not hold. And people blame me for the comm strategy of the Bernie campaign. I was the national press secretary. He was head of comms. This is the same Mike Casca, so direct your concerns there. He went on Twitter defending AOC, saying she opposes codification of IHRA. This non-binding resolution didn't do that. And Electronic Intifada goes on to characterize that as dishonest and disingenuous spin, which was my recollection of it at the time, and of Casca's sort of flailing defense of her on the internet. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, no. I'm in total agreement. I think it's also as well. You've got to bear in mind it's been kind of forgotten now. But AOC had the temerity to claim that Kamala was dring everything in her power to try and end the genocide, when it's just a total lie,
tirelessly fighting.
Lie.
Yeah.
And I think what's really quite, we mentioned the kind of disappearing Democrats, the lesser spotted. I saw a report recently in the New York Times, an internal review of why they lost in 2024 had been scrapped And because they were worried about alienating parts of their base. I mean, I'm not sure who their base consists of, apart from some deranged Hillary Clinton supporters at this stage. But the point is that they were going to conduct a post-mortem of why they lost in 2024, and now they're not doing it because the most obvious answer would be they were supporting a genocide and openly and brazenly lying about the fact that they weren't, and the fact that they were trying to stop it, and insulting anyone who challenged them. What was it Kamala said? I'm speaking, or something. And that became like something that they latched onto as like, oh well, this just shows how assertive Kamala Harris is. The reality is that she was an awful candidate with offering nobody anything that they actually wanted, and was central to the facilitation of a genocide. And what's more, they took this. The Biden administration took this strident pro-Israeli position, despite knowing that this was actually just playing into Trump's hands, and supporters of Israel were just going to vote for Trump anyway, irrespective. So, I mean,
by the way,
they aren't. Sorry, go ahead.
You're completely right. The writing was on the wall for this, by the way. I did an episode with Marianne Williamson, who was at the time running for DNC chair, or had just ended her campaign, and this other gentleman who was involved in the process in some way. I don't remember now. I'm sorry. And I remember having them on at the time, asking them about Marianne had, as she had dropped out, had thrown her vote behind the DNC chair. And I remember asking, what's going on in terms of accountability? What affirmations did you get that there was going to be any reflection on the choice to do the Biden age cover-up or senility, whatever you want to call it, unfit health cover-up, the Gaza cover-up? Those are the two biggest factors that led to the Democrats having lost. And I noticed in that interview and in my research leading up to that interview that people kept repeating this phrase, we're looking forward, not backward. We're looking forward, not backward.
Yeah.
All of the DNC candidates, they all kept saying it. And so it comes as no surprise to me that having done an internal audit of what went wrong, they just decide, oh, we're not going to release it. We're looking forward, not backward, because it was never going to be. There was never going to be any accountability. And do you want to know why? Look at this new political poll that just came out 24 hours ago as of us recording this for the 2028 primary. This is for ages 18 to 29, which really breaks my heart because I thought the kids were okay. Kamala Harris comes in number one with 53%, followed by Tim Walz at 11, Gavin Newsom at 11, and AOC at 8%.
Yeah.
We're going to get some combination of AOC. I think the best bet is going to be Ro Khanna, but it's going to be some combination of AOC, Ro Khanna, Gavin Newsom, and Kamala Harris. Up against some combination of who? JD Vance, Tucker Carlson. I think we're on the track for President Carlson.
Yeah, Cthulhu probably running as the vice, the VP. But I mean, look, there is a push now for AOC to be the next candidate. She's being built up like that. And again, you don't get at this stage, into the Oval Office without making a deal with the devil with Israel one way or another. And it's like it's often said that US presidents always leave office with this hatred of the Israelis, like a personal visceral hatred of the Israelis. And if you go back, I think it's the best part of 20 years now, Obama was kind of caught, his mic was still on at some event, and he was talking, I think it was to Nicolas Sarkozy, who was the French president, and they were complaining about Netanyahu, and Sarkozy was saying, I can't stand the guy, and then Obama was like, how do you think I feel? I have to speak to him every day. And then now, we fast forward,
An open mic during last week's G20 summit caught President Obama and French President Nicolas Sarkozy complaining about Israel's prime minister, according to a report by Reuters. "I cannot bear Netanyahu. He's a liar," said Sarkozy. Obama, according to a French interpreter who was translating his remarks, replied, "You're fed up with him, but I have to deal with him even more often than you." The president didn't exactly come to the defense of Netanyahu, whom he most recently saw at the UN in September. It's not surprising, says Martin Indyk, who served as U.S. ambassador to Israel during the Clinton and Bush administrations.
It reveals the inner feelings of the president towards Prime Minister Netanyahu. I don't think it's any secret that these two leaders have not gotten on, basically, from their first meeting on.
And an Oval Office encounter this past May further revealed the frosty relationship between the leaders.
While Israel is prepared to make generous compromises for peace, it cannot go back to the 1967 lines.
Netanyahu essentially lecturing a stern-faced President Obama. Today, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney, in an off-camera briefing, would not comment on the open mic gaffe. He instead stressed the president's support of Israel, most recently in opposing a vote to give the Palestinian Authority membership in the UN's cultural agency, UNESCO, a move France supported.
America's commitment to Israel's security is unshakable.
Yeah, and now we fast forward to today, and the Netanyahus are pretty much on a weekly vacation in DC. And then every time he addresses Congress, he gets a record number of standing ovations for coming out with genocidal rhetoric. And also, bizarrely, he and his wife bring their dirty laundry with them so it gets washed at the White House. It would be funny if it wasn't just so dystopian and depressing, really. I think that the American political system, as far as I can tell, I'm obviously not based there, and a lot of the kind of daily cut and thrust is not something I'm keeping an eye on. But it does seem like both major political parties in the US are in very serious trouble. Trump's not popular, the Republicans aren't popular, but then the Democrats are also nowhere. And yet, such is the way the system is structured, only a Republican or a Democrat can win.
Yep.
That's
why it's so frustrating. I mean, yes and no to that last point, because what's so frustrating is it does feel like there's this enormous moment of political opportunity where I don't think it has ever been so obvious, at least in our sort of modern history, that there is a disconnect between both major political parties and what the public wants. The disapproval of both parties being as low as it is, the economic crisis being as significant as it is, and America's foreign adventurism being such a blow to the face of half the country that supported Trump, largely because of this idea of America first. And the fact that there is no political entity willing to exploit that rift, and the fact that people like AOC and Bernie, who should be sort of exploiting that void, even if they were exploiting it to kind of rehabilitate the Democratic Party, which I don't agree with doing, but they're not even really doing that because they're unwilling to have any tension, more than 5% tension on the margins with the Democratic Party at all, in a way that would give them the sort of credibility to fight back. Even Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, frankly, are willing to be more in conflict with their party than the alleged insurgents on the left. I don't know if you saw any of this Marjorie Taylor Greene, New York Magazine, I think, piece where she's now complaining about all this stuff. She says she doesn't like the way that the women in the Trump orbit have to be tarted up with lip injections and big boobs. She thinks it's, I don't know that she calls it anti-feminist, but that's the clear implication. She's been coming out with all of these criticisms. She's going hard on the Epstein stuff, saying, it's child molestation is not something that we can negotiate around for political reasons. Rarely do you see, and obviously Thomas Massie and his critique of Israel has been really strident. Rarely do you see that level of bass in the voice coming from folks on the left. So it is, and don't even get me started, speaking of New York Magazine, on Zohran Mamdani, who's on the cover this week. It's bi-weekly. On the cover this week with Jessica Tisch, his police commissioner, and a proud Zionist from the Adams administration in a place of a position of prominence in the very front of the frame, down in the corner, glowering. And there has been some conversation about the editorial choice of who from his administration to include in that photograph, because certainly it wasn't everybody. So did Zoran choose to center Tish in this way? Did the photographers, in a kind of like cheekiness or an interest in like actually talking about the political tensions involved, choose to include her in this photograph? I mean, I have questions. But one question I don't have is whether or not there's any resistance party in America, because the answer is no.
Yeah, not. And I might add as well that, like, you got to bear in mind that, I mean, on the subject of AOC, and her credentials, like, Mamdani, what I find very interesting about Mamdani, is that he has done probably the most shameless and most wide-ranging kind of reversal on everything. Like public. I mean, he's not gone to the Wailing Wall yet, but I'm sure it's only a matter of time. But like in terms of like repudiating things that he said in the past or like past positions, I can think of few other politicians who've quite so extremely flip-flopped after getting into office. And I mean, to be fair, like the knives have been out for him, in an insane way. But despite the fact that what he is preaching is extremely, sorry, just to finish, despite the fact that what he's preaching is extremely modest. And he's not going to have the power or influence to actually do anything meaningful, even if he really wanted to. And I don't think that he does. But the point is he is genuinely seen as a threat to Western civilization. And we at the Gazan have reported on how in this past summer there was an influencer retreat that was attended by Charlie Kirk. It was I forget who organized it now. Was it Larry Ellison? There was some major Zionist. There was some major like kind of Zionist money man who convened this influencer retreat that a large number of people, including the god awful Seth Dillon, were invited to, and like a significant proportion of the retreat in the Hamptons, no less, was talking about how dangerous Zoran Mamdani was, and how like it was going to result in Arabic being taught to children in New York, and like all this other stuff. Like they genuinely believe this stuff, and it's like this is just goes to show that like anyone who steps out of the duopoly line in any even rhetorical way is viewed as a dangerous threat in need of neutralization, and that can potentially, as in the case of Charlie Kirk, include assassination. I mean, that's the position we're in now.
Well, that's what was so frustrating about Zoran. It's like, if they're gonna feel this way about you anyway, and if they felt this way about you and mobilized against you in these ways, and you still won the primary, then in some ways, to me, what's most dispiriting about that particular instance is that I don't know that I agree that he doesn't want to do the things that he is advocating for, or that, his heart and soul, whatever that's worth, isn't in the right place. But this idea that these political calculations have to be made to win, I feel is so pernicious, because he proved that wasn't true. He won in a blue state like New York. Winning the primary is the game. I'm not immune. I'm not ignorant of the ways in which corporate Democrats have sabotaged outcomes even after the socialists won the primary. I had India Walton on, who was a socialist who won her race in Buffalo, New York for morality, and still managed to get ousted in the general. Like, I'm not ignorant of the fact that was possible, but there were a lot of specific factors in Zoran's case that insulated him against that sort of tomfoolery. And in fact, obviously, we know that he won the general. So it really raises questions about his need to capitulate. And then the left's integrity as a whole, when it is running cover for him and making excuses for him to capitulate, when there is no rational, strategic reason to do so. And so now we're getting all of this, wait until he's in office. Well, by the time people listen to this, he will be in office. And I don't doubt that people will say, well, he just got into office. Let's give him 6 months to see. And I would remind folks that this was exactly what AOC told us when she declined to force the vote. And that, that all of the Democrats said about Biden's first 2 years when he had the trifecta, that we had to wait and see. And the second 2 years, it was, he no longer has Congress, so he can't do anything. And I don't know how many times we have to do this. By the way, I gotta actually shoehorn this in here. Sorry to drag you, Kit, into a little bit of a force the vote conversation.
Go for it.
There was some big force the vote news that got sort of buried in the weeds. So there was an interview between Tucker Carlson and Matt Gaetz, I think it was. And it went viral because Matt Gaetz was talking about how AOC used to be friendly with Republicans, but then after January 6th became less friendly, and Republicans were making fun of this for reasons and blah, 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 blah. I didn't care about that aspect of the clip. The part of the clip that I cared about is that Matt Gaetz revealed that AOC admitted that she admired conservatives when the Freedom Caucus did force the vote 2 years after the leftists could have done force the vote to oust Nancy Pelosi.
AOC, same thing.
AOC is a very different person today than when she got to Congress. In
Totally
terms of
corrupted.
Co-opted.
Completely. Oh, the Gaza war's fine. It's like, what?
When we were ousting McCarthy, she came up to me and was like, I really respect this because I'll be honest, we don't have the guts to do this on our side.
What's she like?
Before January 6th, she was incredibly chummy with Republicans in Congress, would regularly come over to our side, sit down, hang out, talk about her day.
Did you ever date her?
I did not, no.
Did you try?
No. And not my cup of tea.
Okay, all right. Then it becomes irrelevant. They're just being dumb. But look, I don't know how much you want to take the word of Matt Gaetz, the characterization of Matt Gaetz, for what it's worth. But if it is true, I don't even know what to make of that. Is it just like, I have regrets? Brianna, Jimmy Dore was right that we should have forced the vote back then, and I'm willing to confess this to you. Does she see the force the vote movement as somehow strategically different than what the Republicans doing, where she would support what they were doing but not support the same thing? Like, I don't even know what to make of that.
Well, I mean, I think I just generally think that this has actually been somewhat forgotten now, because such as the the pace at which events move. But I think that one of the worst things that AOC did, and actually the squad more generally did, was after Biden got the nomination in 2020, they were talking a lot about how they were going to make Biden's life hell. Mm-hmm. If he won, and they would push him left, and they were going to get left-wing candidates who were standing on Medicaid for all platforms, installed. And there was a very lengthy piece in Politico that was literally called, I think it was literally called, "Progressives Prepared to Put the Squeeze on Joe Biden." And you got to bear in mind that there will have been some people who fell for this nonsense. And then you fast forward 6 months into Biden's presidency, which, he explicitly, Biden, in a rare moment of honesty, told donors on a call, nothing will fundamentally change if I win. Like, the 6 months into Biden's term in office, AOC saying, well, I struggle to think how any Democratic voter could be disappointed with the job he's doing. And it's like, there's that saying, fool me once, shame on you. Like, I think we've gotten to the point now where people are so cynical about the system that they're disconnected from it to an extent that actually politicians are probably happy about, because it means that they can just be hypocrites, not keep promises, say whatever, and just keep going. The whole force the vote issue. I mean, the squad were blamed for sabotaging the infrastructure bill, were they not? Because allegedly it didn't allocate enough money or something.
But they were right. But they were right? Like that. Yeah, that's what they were right about. The bifurcation of the bill was a clear plot to sabotage the human infrastructure aspects of the bill that did not have bipartisan support, right? There was the infrastructure traditional infrastructure part of the bill, roads, bridges, et cetera, which both sides wanted because it's a lot of money to go to different people's districts around the country to like build things, cash injections into states. And also because, there was some COVID stuff in there that everyone needed to reopen, right? And business community wanted the economy to go. So for capitalism reasons, there was stuff that everybody wanted. And then there was the human infrastructure stuff that, keeps people alive, makes sure that people can eat and have houses over their heads and childcare and things like that. And clearly both parties are against that stuff too. So they bifurcated it so that there wouldn't be this up-down vote, because remember, this stuff was getting done by budget reconciliation, if I recall correctly, which meant that the Democrats could pass it, but they needed everybody on board. And they only had like 2 bites at the apple over the course of that first term. And so by, if you force everything together, then people are going to have to make a hard decision about whether or not they were actually going to vote for the good stuff and sabotage all the bad stuff. But if you bifurcate it, it's no longer an issue. A very similar thing that happened with the $15 minimum wage, right? Where it was in the first COVID relief bill. Schumer takes it out on advice of the parliamentarian. Bernie tries to put it back in, but you need 60 votes to put it back in, not the bare 50 plus the tiebreaker of VP vote. And so, I guess we still don't have a minimum wage raise since the year 2009. There are people listening to this podcast that were in elementary school the last time we had a minimum wage raise in this country. Yeah, I mean, they were right to hold the line and on the infrastructure bill. But to your point, if they get blamed for stuff anyway, they're gonna get blamed. Like, I need everyone to get through their heads that you can cheerlead rah Joe Biden the way AOC and Bernie did, endorsing him like a year before anybody asked you to, and being the last folks saying that he should stay in the race even after his catastrophic debate performance. And you're still gonna get blamed for everything bad that happened in the country, so you might as well pursue your agenda. And this is what I thought the genius of Mamdani was. He seemed so uncompromising and strident in the primary and stood his ground on stuff that, frankly, he didn't really have to stand his ground on, and that people would have sort of accepted, frankly, if he was a little squirmy about with the globalized intifada of it all. But he showed principle, and that principle was inspiring to folks, and I think was part of why he won in the first place. And then to have gotten past the hard part and start being squishy and keeping people like Jessica Tisch around and coming out to anti-endorse Chiose and to pre-endorse Hakeem Jeffries, none of it makes any sense. And it's giving very much AOC force the vote in beginning of 2021 style vibes.
I mean, but this is the thing, though, is like, I mean, to get perhaps potentially a bit conspiratorial here, is their purpose not to wreck stuff like this so they can be blamed? Is that not kind of hardwired into the system? Because you've got to bear in mind that one of the reasons the US doesn't have a universal basic income today is that none other than Richard Nixon attempted to implement it, and Democrats in Congress voted against it because it wasn't high enough. Which is a rather forgotten chapter in relatively recent American history. But there were legitimate grievances against the way that this legislation was presented. But I mean, is their purpose to wreck this stuff so A, they can be blamed, and B, zero progress can be made?
Well, I certainly do think that that's the purpose of the Democrats at large.
In general.
I don't know that I believe it's the purpose of the leftists within the Democratic caucus in particular. Maybe I'm still just too naive and hope-pilled to believe that they actually do want, at least some of them do want the good thing to actually pass, and that they wouldn't sabotage, say, Medicare for all or something if it were a possibility. But in the Democrats as a whole, we saw this in California. You see this in blue states where there is no Republican opposition, where there's Democratic supermajorities. They managed to hoist themselves by their own petards on a daily basis and come up with cockamamie excuses. I really encourage people to go back to the early days of this podcast and listen to an interview with Ash Kalra that I think we recorded in 2020, might have been early 2021, about what was next for Medicare for All in the wake of the Bernie 2020 campaign, and how the plan that was articulated to me by Bernie's healthcare czar, who used to be the head of the NNU, was, okay, California is going to do a statewide Medicare for All program, and we're going to do state by state, and it's going to spread through the country. And then Gavin Newsom is going to end up being president and implement what he did in California, countrywide. And then when it failed in California, I had Ash Kalra on, who was a city council member there, to explain what had happened. And I remember being very unsatisfied with the explanation. And that was one of my sort of radicalizing moments when I realized, this is rigged. Like, no one's coming to save us.
Yeah, well, no, I mean that is. I kind of have this sense now where it's like, I mean, in the UK, for example, like the current government won this huge kind of historic landslide victory in summer 2024. And they are now the least popular British government in history, having replaced the least popular British government in history. And they are, on the one hand, thankfully, mercifully, they see Keir Starmer et al. Seem to be destroying the Labour Party, which is this, much like the Democratic Party, this wretched beast that is just long overdue its expiration. But at the same time, there's nothing really serious emerging to challenge any of this, and it's like it seems like we're kind
of what's going on with the new.
Your party,
did they come up with the name? Well, your party.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they had this dumpster fire conference and seem to have been rather forgotten about now, where there were like kind of different factions at war with each other. And I mean, again, in the spirit of maybe this is a bit conspiratorial, but your party emerged at a time when, yes, there was huge levels of disillusionment and dissent in established political parties and established politics within the British population. Was its purpose to basically trap public dissent into something that was never going to work? Because it's after an initial burst of mass exuberance about the emergence of this new political faction, it just seems to have completely vanished from any consideration.
Or are there infiltrators and saboteurs? I wonder about this sometimes. All of the left infighting Green Party, the actual members of the Green Party that I talk about identified infiltrators that they've had to oust from the party, and God knows how many that they don't catch, who are tasked with and successful at stymieing their efforts. And we know how much money the Democratic Party spends opposing Green parties through legal means, contesting their ballot access, challenging their signatures, just basically forcing them to spend money on court costs that they don't have to run them into the ground. The Democratic Party spent on ads against the Green Party in this past election cycle for the first time. Independent candidates have a really difficult time recruiting folks to work for their campaigns, both because they know they'll get blacklisted if they ever want to work for a Democrat or I guess a Republican again, but also because so many of them are saboteurs. I mean, talk to these candidates and they'll tell you about what they've experienced and how, I think it was like Mary, I know, she's not been great, especially recently on Zionism on the internet. But, I think her campaign, one of her senior staffers ended up leaving like halfway through to go work for Biden. This is the kind of stuff that's happening. Look at my predecessor on the Bernie campaign from 2016. Simone Sanders, who turned around and went to work for Kamala Harris and then Joe Biden and is rewarded with a cushy job on MSNBC. It's not far-fetched if we're being conspiratorial here.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got to bear in mind that, again, in the spirit of just brass neckery. I mean, who was the quote unquote journalist who wrote the tell-all about how the Democratic Party covered up the fact that Biden's brain had melted? It was
Alex
Jake
Thompson.
Tapper. No, yeah, it was Jake Tapper. and who was like, someone who was like aggressively attacking people for suggesting that he was suffering from mental decline for 4 years before doing this. Like, I mean, I reviewed that in it. If I may shamelessly plug my own podcast here, I run a podcast called Decline and Fall. My dear friend Alex Mackay, and we did an episode titled "Weekend at Biden's," and we reviewed Jake Tapper's very revealing book where he like removes any suggestion that he had any role in conning people into believing that Biden was quote unquote sharp as a tack when he was just absolutely demented. It's like this indictment of the media which like conveniently gets himself off the hook as the author. I mean, everything seems so theatrical and staged, at this point. I mean, maybe I'm just being overly cynical and disillusioned myself, but I mean, really, like, it does seem that the conditions in the US, economically, politically, socially, seem like pretty conducive to the emergence of like, a truly radical revolutionary movement. And I mean, as far as I can see, there isn't one. The Green Party absolutely does represent a major threat to the Democrats, and I think that the relentless attacks on them by during Kamala's campaign showed that they were viewed as a major threat. And people were being told straight up. Yeah, people were being told straight up that if you vote for the Green Party, you're voting for fascism. Like you have to. You're very conveniently feeding into this vote blue no matter who bullshit. So I think, I mean, there's, I mean, Jill Stein's got a lot of credibility, and she's certainly preferable to the Democrats at this stage. But I mean, really, I mean, there doesn't seem to be this, this mass movement arising. There just seems to be, a lot of bitterness, a lot of disconnection, which helps elites get away with the most heinous of crimes because nobody is paying attention and people just see it as inevitable. But I like I said before we started recording, I remain optimistic in general, as depressing as that is. Call it bloody-mindedness, but I do think that something better could be on the horizon. It's just a pity we have to live through this interim period of growing repression and criminality at home and abroad across the West.
Well, not to get astrological about it, but it is supposed to be a good year, a change year, I should say, in 2026. And for me personally, it's supposed to be a banger year, whatever that means. So Happy New Year. There's something to be optimistic about. For some of you, depending on your charts and the audience. I know my audience loves when I talk in that way. Before I let you go, Kit, can I ask you one more question, related to something that's happened to me recently? I think it was Christmas Eve, or maybe the Christmas Day, I was banned from Instagram. As I can put it together, what happened was, folks may remember that I was fired from Rising. No cause was given. It was a day after I had done a pretty damning radar about the mainstream media's complicity in Islamophobia and the genocide. But also, I had interviewed the sister of an Israeli hostage who refused to talk about her sister and make it a human interest story, but repeatedly attacked American citizens in Dearborn, accusing them of being terrorists by virtue of themselves being Muslim.
We are not 200 years ago. This is not okay that we have terror organizations that controlling the free world and people in the West letting it happen and stay on the streets, killing the hostages now, or Israelis must die. What did I do wrong? What did my sister did wrong? Nothing. We did nothing wrong.
Well,
this was happening inside our own country. Yeah. And if the world won't help us, we will see 9/11 the second time in the US as well. But we can already see in the United States, in Michigan, rallies that's calling death to America. not condemning terror organizations in Israel or any other place, in fact, is reflecting to your country as well.
I'm just going to push back against the implication that in Michigan, which has the largest Muslim and Arab population in America, that there is any threat of terrorism from our own people. And I would like to clarify also that one of the rationale that was presented for 9/11 was discussed with America's support of Israel's continued occupation of Palestine. So that's neither here nor there. I really do hope that Netanyahu agrees and Israel agrees to the ceasefire deal that could bring all the hostages, including your sister, home. And I'm sure many people watching are praying for her safety. It was a very disgusting interview on the behalf of this woman. And in sympathy for her, not knowing what was going on with her sister, I encouraged her repeatedly to keep to the topic of the conversation. And she insisted on making it about these broader foreign policy questions. So then when I then followed up and said, okay, well, if you want to talk about foreign policy, what do you make of the fact that Netanyahu is being protested for not prioritizing hostage release? She says, oh, well, I'm just a girl. You can't ask me about those kinds of questions. I'm just a girl mourning her sister. I said, okay, well, then let's talk about your sister. We went back and forth like this for a while until she was so offensive and Islamophobic that I entered the interview. When I was fired, my treatment of her was characterized as disrespectful, and the reason for me being fired, although that was never the stated case. That's the background, the stated reason. Subsequently, recently, as I understand it, the sister, obviously all the hostages have been released for a long time as the condition of the ceasefire, which, of course, Hamas has upheld its end of the bargain. Israel has not killing, over 400 people since the ostensible ceasefire began, withholding supplies and all of the rest. But the sister is now in a group of people who are now alleging that they were raped in Hamas custody. Because the sister was in the news with those allegations, I became the focus of a kind of like a bot farming spamming campaign all of the day that came out. I was blocking people and ignoring it. It was like the holidays. But decided to, I always post about Palestine, but just kind of like double my posting on Palestine. That's usually how I respond to any attempts to get me censored. I posted about the story of the German reporter who says that she was raped in Israeli custody. And I posted about the story that was going viral at the time of the Palestinian praying on the side of the road who was run over by an Israeli with an ATV very intentionally. After I posted those two stories, about an hour or two later, my Instagram was suspended. Now, you can read into whatever causality you want, but that's the timeline of what happens.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. You obviously have experienced being arrested as a consequence of your critical reporting on Israel. And you have also done a great deal of coverage on surveillance software, which uses kind of a click-through ads and other means to infiltrate your devices. And about how Israel has backdoor technology that allows them to have access to all kinds of software that normal people use. So I invite you to talk just a little bit about that in these last few minutes before we wrap up, and to sort of give your sense of what's going on in terms of the Zionist kind of capture, for lack of a better word, of the U.S. media with the purchases of CBS and TikTok and Meta and the Warner deal, all of these different grabs at big media sources, and the fact that there are these backdoor ways that there is access to your information through Israeli technology, and what that's doing to our ability, even as journalists or as lay people, to articulate our distaste with the actions of Israel.
Yeah, well, there's an absolutely extraordinary. We already have a heavily conglomerated, media sphere, at least in mainstream terms, where you have 2 or 3 companies that own everything. Both in terms of newspapers and TV news outlets, and in the US, for example. But there is a hostile takeover of every sphere of kind of media and civil society, by Zionist interests now, and like like all of these mergers, and Barry Weiss being put in charge of like CBS, and just all these absolutely brazen moves to like blacklist and deplatform people who take even the mildest kind of critical line on Israel imaginable. It is really frightening, and it must be remembered that when US lawmakers voted to basically forcibly seize TikTok. This explicitly followed like the head of the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, saying we have a TikTok problem because younger generations are being confronted with anti-Zionist, pro-Palestinian content in a way that they weren't before, and they, by token of being human beings, are siding with Palestinians. This is like an ongoing story, and like the other aspect of this, which is, as you kind of you referenced, I recently wrote about Intellexa, which is this it's like an Israeli spyware firm, of which there are a great many, and I mean this company is like so sordid that even the US Treasury has sanctioned them for their actions, which is kind of like pretty unprecedented. But like you can find the report on my website. Is that like the thing that jumped out to me the most was Intellexa manages a large number of advertising companies that create fake ads. Including like job listings, etc., to target Israeli critics with. And then you click on it, and then your phone is taken over. And if this technology is so advanced that if it senses that it's been detected, it self-deletes, so there's no trace of it on your device. But they've also honed zero-click infiltration, where just looking at an advert can completely take over your phone. So it's like this full spectrum assault. And I must add that Mint Press News, they recently ran a fundraising campaign. I mean, like independent media. I know it's a tough time for everyone, but we all need to eat, right? Like it's times tough for us as well. And like Mint Press News recently ran a fundraiser, and Indiegogo at the very last minute just decided to cancel it and not hand over any of the funds that Mint Press had legitimately raised. But, the Gazan had exactly the same experience, 2.5 years ago when we ran a fundraiser, which again at the last minute after we raised over $100,000 from our generous reader donations, they just decided to boot us off it and not give us the sums that we were. That we'd raised, and I think that this is just getting more and more brazen because they keep getting away with it, I'm shocked that there's not more pushback against this, because this is 2025. We've had the best part of 10 years of censorship and suppression, and actually real world repression. Affecting both left and right now, and people don't speak up when their adversaries are on the receiving end of it, and then cry like a pig that's stuck under a gate when it happens to them. And it's like, no, we need a concerted pushback against this because it affects us all.
These British idiots cry like a pig stuck under a gate.
Yeah, no, well, sorry, I'm a product of my heritage, but no, on that bombshell, Brianna, thank you so much for having me on. I think keep up the fight, comrade. You're doing great.
You as well, Kit, and I really do encourage folks to go over and follow your Substack, support the Gray Zone, support Mint Press News. Like, it is, to your point, Kit. It was the what was it, PayPal with the truckers protests, and I think a lot of liberals were indifferent to that. I was fired by the same network that fired Jimmy Kimmel. Liberals were upset about Jimmy Kimmel, but there have been canaries in the coal mine this whole time. Your arrest, the way that we're seeing the German police just completely abuse protesters in the streets. I mean, it's horrible. And even Kanye West, who I am loath to defend for many reasons, but when JP Morgan shuts down his banking access over his political beliefs or his anti-Semitism, there's never been a rule in this country before that you're not allowed to be a bigot. You're not allowed to have a bank account if you're a bigot. I wish in some respects that there were that rule, but this is a bank that will bank with Jeffrey Epstein happily, but shut down Kanye West. And it starts to really raise significant questions about your ability to exist in the world. What exactly can they take away when this IHRC definition of anti-Semitism becomes a pretext to infringe upon every civil right you thought you had? So thank you again for joining us, Kit. I encourage everyone to read the full reporting that he's done on this Israeli software because it's deeply dystopian, very scary, and is something that we should be actively resisting before it's too late, if it's not too late already. Happy New Year's to everybody who tuned in. Kit, do you want to give anybody any specific websites or Twitter accounts or anything to follow you before we go?
Yeah, sure. Find me on Twitter again, imaginatively, Kit Klarenberg, KITKLARENBERG. Again, thank you so much for having me on, Brianna. It's been a joy. Let's talk again soon. Take care, my friend.
Take care. And thanks to all of you for listening. You know, you can get an extra episode of Bad Faith Podcast every Monday at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. Take care of yourselves. Happy New Year. And as always, keep the faith. Hey, YouTube. Thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.